seeing a lot of people join, so we'll let the number kind of even out, give it a little bit. Hello to everybody joining us. We're very excited to have you. We're very excited to have Ann and Liz. Thank you for joining us and for supporting Grassroots by joining us. I'll just give it a little bit more time and then I will kick it off.
Jessica Mackey, all right.
All right, it looks good. I'm gonna give a quick introduction. Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome. We're so excited to be hosting this event tonight, and we're so glad that you could all be here to join us. My name is Courtney. I'm an event coordinator at Grassroots Bookstore down in downtown Corvallis, Oregon. And today we have local poet Ann Staley with us, reading from her 5th collection of poems, Fire in the Desert, and she's joined in conversation with radio host Liz Schillinger. Ann grew up in suburban Harrisburg, PA. When she returned from the Peace Corps Brazil, she set off in her VW bug, visiting with everyone she knew and picking up every hitchhiker, taking them wherever they needed to go on a 10K mile journey. She settled in Ashland, living in a log cabin with no electricity, an outhouse, and wood stove. Ann met her husband, Courtney Cloyd, in Ashland and considered herself almost a native after 45 years in Oregon. Liz Schillinger reads a lot and writes a bit. Has a fraught relationship with the Saturday New York Times crossword. She talks to people about the living creative experience of writing, reading, and performance on her radio show, Word Up, airing on KMUZ, Salem's community radio station. So the way this event is going to work is we're going to have Ann and Liz mostly in conversation for the majority of the event. And then we'll open up the floor to the audience Q&A, and that will be the last 15-20 minutes. Additionally, there's going to be a link shortly in the chat box that is a document created of Ann's poetry, so you can read and follow along as she reads her poems. The Q&A portion, at any point during their conversation, please feel free to put a question into the Q&A chat box. And then at the end of the event, that's what we're gonna run the Q&A off of. So please load it up with your good questions for both of our lovely hosts. And then also just to remind you that the link to buy Fire in the Desert will be in the chat shortly as well. And I highly encourage you to buy it from us, from Grassroots. And not only will you be supporting Ann as a poet, but you'll also be supporting Grassroots, a small indie bookstore that's able to bring events like this to you. Okay, and without further ado, I'm going to let Ann and Liz take it away.
Thank you very much.
All right. Hello, Ann.
Hi, Liz. So I wanted to just say a few words of thanks. I'd like to thank Jack Wolcott and Sandy Smith, who are the owners of Grassroots Books, for the decades of service to our community of readers and writers. I have been invited to read on several occasions, and the bookstore setting, which you can't see inside, but you can see the photograph of the outside, is cozy and welcoming, and the staff is always helpful. Thanks as well to Tiffany Harlan, the bookstore manager, for setting up the details so that this bi-coastal reading could become a reality. In these pandemic times, we bless everyone who works here, because the pandemic has certainly given us more time to be readers and writers too. I'd also like to thank my writing colleague and radio talk show hostess, Liz, for her many contributions in the planning and organizing of this virtual reading. Liz knows about lighting and camera work, and she has been a supporter of my work for as long as I've known her, which has been, we were trying to figure it out, at least 2 decades.
Definitely.
Finally, I want to thank my friends on both coasts. Some friends since junior high school in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, now scattered from New York State to Florida. And here on the West Coast, from San Diego, California to Bainbridge Island, Washington. I have one friend who may be joining us from Kansas and a former student who is watching from France, where it is now 3 a.m. She wasn't sure she'd wake up, but she has her alarm clock set. Tonight I'll be reading from book number 4, The Age of Bronze, and from number 5, Fire in the Desert. I'll also be reading one poem of Mary Oliver's and one of William Stafford's, 2 poems who I admire and whose poems changed my life. For publication this year, May and June, I hope, I have 2 more manuscripts at the ready: Small Beauties, a chapbook, and The Spirit That Moves in All Things, a full-length manuscript. You know, that's 100+ pages. So that's my news. And I'm going to start, the first poem I'm going to read is from The Age of Bronze.
And let me just show that book again.
Okay.
Here it is, The Age of Bronze.
And if you have this book, it's on page 17, if you want to just follow along in your own book.
There's also a link in the chat room where you can follow along with the poetry as well.
So not black and white, but gray. In a letter I received last week, my correspondent wrote about my silver hair and long gray dresses. And while I don't even own a gray dress, I felt intuitively that he had noticed about me an essential quality. I do exhibit a great degree of friendliness toward gray. For example, I was a friend to my salt and pepper hair. I loved the first strands of silver that appeared at age 17 and about which my physics teacher, Mr. Salt, enjoyed teasing me. I am a friend to gray wool flannel, skirts long and pleated or slim and straight with a side vent. I'm a friend to the Pacific Ocean clouds tumbling across the Coast Range, moving east with watery shadows and translucent lights. I am a friend to fogs, the ones filling the valley floor in winter or freezing individual grasses and ferns. Even the most reluctant observer will notice the detailed beauties of nature. Ashes, too, fragile shapes holding the last of the fire's heat and bright color. The gray smoke swirling skyward, and those 2 abandoned kittens, so wild that it took weeks of feeding and cajoling before I could touch their gauzy gray fur. I am a friend to gull feathers found on the beach walks and the smooth stones piled on the windowsill. And shocking though it is, I loved my 2 gray Hondas, one slate colored, the other a sleek silver. And also my Harris tweed coat that I wore in the drizzling rain of Scotland. And yes, a gray suede vest that I saw one night in a San Francisco cafe. I am a friend to granite and flagstone, to weathered wood gone gray with the rain, to steam rising off hot tea, and to the buttons on my Nana's knitted dresses, dove gray pearl, shining softly against heather yarns. And so my correspondent was right. Others name our truths, hold them up like mirrors, like clouds in the gray sky of November. Liz?
And earlier, you shared with me that a friend had, a friend from 7th grade had asked you a question, and I'd like to ask you the same question.
Okay.
And When did you know you were
Frankie.
Frankie, I'm gonna talk to her in just a minute. And when did you know you were a writer? And why did you choose poetry for your form?
Mhm. Well, my mother was a wonderful letter writer, and I learned how to be a good letter writer because she sent me letters too. And a letter is a lot like an essay. If you take away the dear somebody and the sincerely at the end, you basically have the form of an essay. And so I first wrote essays, and I've had some published in books. But then I turned to the short form of the essay, which is a poem, where you get to the meat of the thought or the thing you want to consider without a lot of extra detail. And so, and poetry, you can sit down, you can write a poem in a minute or two. You know, it would be a first draft, but you could write one. So that's kind of the way I got to from writing letters to poetry. Did that answer your question? Oh, when did I know I was a writer?
Yes.
Well, a lot of people, even in high school, noticed that I was a good writer. And although I was always mimicking, you know, Nathaniel Hawthorne or whoever, you know, the people we were reading.
Exactly.
So I would write like a really good, you know, version of them. But when I found my own voice, you know, stopped imitating other writers' voices, I thought, this is it. Okay, this is what a real writer does. But the first time I actually felt like I was a real writer was when I held my very first book in my hand. And my very first book was called Primary Sources. And I just went, oh, I'm not a teacher who writes, I'm a writer who teaches. So that's how I got there, or here.
Crossed over.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well, how about sharing some more poetry?
Okay. This is from, again, I'm still in the Age of Bronze. Page 27, if you're looking, we have it. And this is a poem from growing up in Harrisburg and also becoming an adolescent, a young adolescent. It's called Single Summer Light. In Pennsylvania, where I grew up, summer light was bright and humid, reflected off water, the Susquehanna River, the Lackawanna Creek, or any of the various swimming pool blues with painted lines, where I practiced for hours, where competition took place. In the evening, fireflies began to show their luminescent bodies, a kind of insect magic that might have encouraged me to study arthropods, but I'm not cut out for the sciences. Though if there'd been ecology then, in the late 50s, early 60s, if I'd read Silent Spring and Sand County Almanac, I might have understood how exacting and poetic prose could be. We had magnificent and harrowing rainstorms, often with thunder and lightning, and hurricanes which made their way inland from the Atlantic to central Pennsylvania. And although we lived in the suburbs, streetlights did not obliterate the stars above us. For several summers, the neighborhood kids gathered in tents or just outside, lying side by side in the soft grasses, a magical gateway into adolescence. And now I'm going to read a poem that changed my life. And I discovered Mary Oliver pretty early. When she published her very first book, and this is her collected Mary Oliver poems, which my friend Cynthia, who may be watching at this point, gifted me with. I have all her books, but I didn't have this collection. So thank you, Cynthia, for that gorgeous book. And the photograph is two hands. You just see two hands and a spoon, and she is feeding a bird. It's a beautiful cover. So this is called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clear, clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. I am not comparing myself to Mary Oliver. It cannot be done.
But she told you,
But
she told you something there that
oh my goodness, yes.
freed you up.
Yes, it really did. And it's in a way, it's the very first few lines about you do not have to repent, you do not have to walk on your knees. I was raised as a Catholic and everything was a sin. If you even thought about like eating too much ice cream, it was a sin. You know, so those lines let me let go of carrying sins around.
She
Regrets, mistakes, those you deal with, but sins are tough.
she's absolving you in a different way.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was.
Do this, and then also that beautiful, tell me your despair, and I'll tell you mine.
Yeah.
We're alike, and we can. There's something beautiful beyond this.
Yes. And meanwhile, this is the next line.
Meanwhile.
Yeah. After the despair lines. Yeah. Okay.
And before you read
Mhm.
Mary's Peak, I wanted to note that so many of your poems are about the beauty of Oregon,
Mhm.
our coasts, the Willamette Valley, Eastern Oregon, our rivers. That's a special subject for you. Our weather, our rain, our skies.
Yeah.
What is it that makes you want to write about our Oregon, our Oregon?
Mm. Well, I think because this is where I live now. And I've been here for long enough to love it. I always loved Pennsylvania, but winters in back east are just like 8 months long practically. So this is as beautiful as Pennsylvania, but no winters, no chains required on your car, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it was coming here and realizing what a special place it was. And that makes me write about it.
That's never left you, that kind of passion. It hasn't faded in
Mhm.
the 33 years you've lived here.
Mhm. No, it never has. And, you know, God bless 52 inches of rain a year because it means that not a lot of people want to live here.
Well, until recently, that's been true. But
That's true. We have many more. It's 4-1 now.
of,
One native Oregonian to 3 people from other places.
wow.
And I think it's just getting ready to turn 1-5.
I blame the TV show Portlandia for most of it.
Oh, yes. Yes. I had a friend who said to me, is that for real? You know, like, do they really give the chickens names before they cook them? You know, that kind of stuff. I said, absolutely. You know, might be a little over the top, but no, it's not really.
Close.
Yeah.
Well, Anne, tell us a little bit about the origin of Mary's Peak, 4090.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, Courtney, my husband, is a geologist, and he takes people on group walks or explorations. He's done a bunch of them over on the dunes, which are the largest dunes in the United States.
Wow.
52 miles of dunes. And he also takes groups of students and other people up to Mary's Peak. And once I just listened to what he had to say, and I thought it was a poem. I just thought it was the perfect way to describe and tell about Mary's Peak, which is the highest peak in the Coast Range for you East Coasters. So it's between Corvallis and the Pacific Ocean, and it's the highest range. We have Mary's Peak is the highest peak in the range. So this is on page 52, if you've got the book, or you can follow along. Okay. Well, I can't find 52. Oh no. It's gotten moved around a bit. It's fallen out. I don't know, I can't find it. Liz, do you have Age of Bronze?
I have it.
You want to read it?
I'd be delighted.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know, the page must have fallen out.
All right. This is Mary's Peak, 4,097 feet. Courtney's talk. Geology is great detective work. Is this a meadow? Why is this mountain here? Why do we have the Coast Range, mostly 2,000 to 3,000 feet or less? Lots of geology is common sense. What can I see here? Climax community, succession community. Hemlock is the climax species. Fire is the change agent. Alder, deciduous, makes way for Douglas fir, a conifer, which makes way for hemlock. Native ponderosa pine on the west side of the Cascades. Coast Range, a marine sandstone, Thais sandstone, 6,000 feet thick. The story evolves forever. It's dynamic. On Mary's Peak, we're sitting on a volcanic flow on top of a seafloor.
Isn't that wild? It just gives me the chills to even.
Me too.
Nice, thank you for reading it. Courtney, thank you.
Oh, I'm so happy to do that.
Yeah.
I want to take one of Courtney's tours up there.
Oh yeah. I'll tell him.
Yeah, this
Or
summer.
he's watching downstairs. He's hearing you say that.
Okay,
Okay.
Courtney, take note. All right, now before we,
I have one more.
before the Age of Bronze, I wanted to,
Oh,
I know you're gonna Well, why don't you tell us the story about your this poem by your mother?
Yeah. So Age of Bronze was, as far as I know, the only poem she ever wrote, unless she wrote them and didn't send me copies, but or she wrote them as a younger woman, but she wrote this when she turned 70. And she was very surprised to realize that 70 was wonderful. She wasn't frightened, or it didn't feel terrible to her. She thought it was wonderful to be 70 years old. And she sent me this poem in her handwriting, which is the cover of the book, is her handwriting on the front page. And on the back side of this poem was a grocery list. So, you know, it wasn't formal, but I read it and I just thought, way to go, Mom. Okay, so here's what she said at age 70. Bronze the leaves and bronze the heartstrings, bronze the fingers that make them sing. Did we know when we reached November, it would rival green gold spring? Was there once an age of gold? If there was, does bronze come after? Gold is garish, hectic, hurried. Bronze is rich with rueful laughter. And my mom lived from 1918 to 1990. I'm now older than she was when she died. And I miss her every day. There's something that I would want to share with her or send her a letter, whatever. And she did not know about this book. She was already deceased when I wrote it. So.
Did she know your poetry, your earlier poetry? Did she know you were a poet? Did you share it with her?
You know, I think I probably did. I'm not sure what I sent her exactly, but I had published some poems, so I probably sent her copies of those. But anyway.
Were you readers together? Did your mom read to you as a child? And
Oh yeah.
Poetry, any part of that?
Nope. No, I think I came to poetry kind of that was my own move. Although, you know, junior high school girls all write poetry and keep journals. So, you know, it's not unusual.
It's not.
Okay.
Well,
go ahead.
Are you ready to move on to your next collection?
Mm-hmm.
This is Fire in the Desert. Here's the cover. And I just want to say it's a wonderful collection of poems. Many of them are very funny. And
really?
I think so.
Okay. Well, I never think of myself as humorous, but.
Oh my goodness. A little bit like well, of course it's autobiographical, but it's a little bit like looking back on younger days of family, friends, being a teacher, and then just kind of a real piece about talking about the right now, your age now, your life as a poet in Corvallis, and you know, just kind of looking off into this very unknown future that you're pretty comfortable with too. So I really love this collection.
Thank you. You know, sometimes even with a poem, I don't really know what I'm doing, and hearing what a reader has to say about it helps me understand often what it was I was doing.
But
Yeah. So this book is dedicated to my longtime friend, Richard Becker, who I believe is watching this evening. So Richard, I'm going to dedicate this. No, I'm not going to dedicate the first poem to you, but because connected to William Stafford. So let me just get on with this. But thank you for watching, Richard. This is page 13, if you have the book. The title is Muse, and the epigram, I am your own way of looking at things. It comes from a William Stafford poem. When William Stafford met his muse, he took his glasses off. The muses continued to sing and buzzed like locusts. He felt the sunlight bend. My muses are quiet and polite, as though they'd been trained by my mother, and well-dressed too, like her. They maintain military posture and are belongers and believers of creeds and the credo that support humility and downright obscurity. They want the applause, every spotlight in the house on their dark hair and evanescent wings. I wait off stage, my lines responsibly learned by second grade. It came in a dream, I say. I learned it in first grade. I inherited this from an Irish uncle. Thank you for listening. So now I'm going to read a poem by William Stafford. And William Stafford, those on the East Coast may not know, was our Oregon Poet Laureate for many years. And then he was a poet who worked in the Library of Congress before they had a national poet laureate, but that's what he was doing in Congress. And the title is Climbing Along the River. Willows never forget how it feels to be young. Do you remember where you came from? Gravel remembers. Even the upper end of the river believes in the ocean. Exactly at midnight, yesterday sighs away. What I believe is all animals have one soul. Over the land they love, they crisscross forever. By William Stafford.
And when we were together earlier, you talked about poets, other poets that have influenced your life and your poetry. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you some poets, some novelists. I'm going to tell you about the people who influenced how I write and whose work I love. And so here's my list. So the first thing I remember that I loved, because I read this as a sophomore in high school, was a novel by Willa Cather and called My Antonia. It was it's a beautiful novel. If you've never read it, read it immediately. You'll be sorry if you miss it. So that novel and her way of writing, it could be poetry, and she did write poetry and short stories, but it is just a beautiful novel. Another person is Norman MacLean, who wrote A River Runs Through It, that got made into a movie that was pretty darn good, starring Brad Pitt and I forget who else.
We always forget who else.
Who the other guy is, yeah.
Brad is
Yeah, he's the main character. And this book, Norman McLean was a college professor of humanities, I think, philosophy maybe, or both, was published when the author was 80 years old and had retired already. So
that gives me so much hope.
yeah,
I just,
start writing now, but you can wait till you're 80 if you want.
well, to write such a perfect piece of literature, it's absolutely perfect.
It is.
No
there's
qualifiers.
There's a sentence in there which I cannot find because I would read the sentence to you, that if I had written that sentence, I would have stopped writing right on the spot, because you're never going to write anything as good as this sentence ever again.
My work here is done.
Yes, exactly. Mary Oliver's work, of course. Kim Stafford, who was William Stafford's son, was the Oregon Poet Laureate and a colleague of mine for 20 years at Lewis and Clark College. Kathleen Dean Moore taught at Oregon State University here in Corvallis. She is an essayist, a naturalist, and a philosopher. Paul Conley was a MacArthur Fellow who taught at Bard College and the director of the Writing and Thinking program. And I taught there for 9 summers and got to know Paul, an amazing man. Peter Sears was from the East Coast. I think it was Pennsylvania, maybe New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And he moved out west. He taught a class that I was in, and big guy, very opinionated, very funny. He lived in Corvallis and Portland mainly. Vince and Patty Wixon were the co-directors of the Oregon Writing Project, and their standard description is teachers teaching teachers.
Mhm.
And so that was very important to my work as a teacher. Their work, their class. Charles Goodrich is another Corvallis poet. He has a wonderful book called The Insects of South Corvallis. It's all about the insects of South Corvallis, which is wonderful. Now that's humorous.
Insectopedia.
It's humorous.
Yeah.
Those poems are humorous. Eric Muller was with a co-director along with David Lang, who is deceased, of Fireweed, a journal of the poetry of Western Oregon. We did that together for 9 years. And someone is putting all the issues online. A friend of ours is putting all the issues of Fireweed online at this point. So that was, and I think we counted it up one time. We published 445 different poets.
Oh my goodness.
In 9 years.
Oh, fantastic.
And then Paul Ann Peterson was the Oregon Poet Laureate for several times in a row. And she lives in Portland. She's just a remarkable writer, and her work has always just touched my heart very, very deeply. So those are my big influences.
And do you continue to read poetry and
Oh, yes.
seek out new poems?
Sure.
New poets?
Sure. And I borrow lines and use them as titles or epigrams, or sometimes they appear in the poem. Of course, I always give the poet, I put them in italics and, recognize where they come from. So that's something that I think other poets do as well, but I notice I do it quite a lot. So those are the people who influenced me as a writer and as a teacher.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm. So the next poem is also from Fire in the, all the rest of the poems are from Fire in the Desert as well. So this is page 9. If you've got the book. This page is not missing. I don't know where that page went. I hope I didn't recycle it. Oh well. And it's titled, I think it's the first poem in the book. Yeah, it is. It's called Stalking Happiness. I stalk my happiness. I don't want to frighten it or have it disappear because of my energetic smile. I take off my shoes, tiptoe in my socks toward the fireplace fire, toward the jar filled with ginger cookies, a glass of red wine at the end of the day. In the quiet, I light the candles on the mantle, watch as Sharon's autumn portraits appear in detail. Friends always ask if they are photographs. No, I respond. The artist works with tiny brush strokes in gouache. My husband winds the Howard clock with the same care. It's been running since the late 1800s, but it must be keyed once a week. I hesitate standing above my lover, asleep in our bed, the moments before as breathless and precious as what might happen next.
And I love this poem for its serenity and the idea that happiness appears in detail, and it's all of it is breathless and precious.
Mhm.
And if you're stalking it, you are stalking it in tiptoe. I mean, you don't have to try too hard. It's just all around you.
Oh,
It's a
thanks.
beautiful poem.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, and this is on page 26, if you're following along in the book. This is called, the title of the poem is Poem Written with Emily, and the epigram is something that she said. So it's italicized. That it will never come again is what makes life so sweet. Emily Dickinson. Poem written with Emily. There must be small handmade notebooks shared with no one, mailed only to a publisher in Boston. A secluded state of being, a few good friends, a cup of tea. You must pay attention to the swallows, the gentians, the lemongrass, the North Star. For the many ways of pausing on paper, the dash is one way. You might rhyme, but keep all your stanzas short, maybe just 4 or 6 lines that feel both delicate and cleverly perfect. So I'm going to read an early poem of hers. This is, let's see, I don't know what she doesn't title her poems. And now I have this XVIL and I can't remember what number it is. But anyway, somebody came along and numbered them later. But this is by Emily. I never saw a moor. I never saw the sea. Yet know I how the heather looks and what a wave must be. I never spoke with God, nor visited in heaven, yet certain am I of the spot, as if the chart were given. So I didn't realize she rhymed so much until I read this out loud. I didn't pick it up just from reading it to myself. I realized she was rhyming when I read it out loud.
I know there's a line in one of her poems that says, well, something to the effect of, if you don't rhyme, at least slant rhyme it.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
she does love the sound
Yes.
of the language.
Yeah.
She's paying attention. But what is it about Emily Dickinson that just opens up people's eyes to poetry?
Well, I think it's her subject matter, for one thing. I think it's her personal story. I mean, there are movies about her, there's a lot written about her. A lot of poets have written poems about her. Like there are a couple that really are funny. So one of them is Undressing Emily. And she has all these buttons down the back of
Billy
her.
Collins.
Yeah.
Billy Collins.
Is that Billy Collins?
Taking off Emily Dickinson's clothes.
Yes. Which is like, holy yay, Billy. He breaks all rules.
Well,
A
fantasy moment.
Yes. Of course, I use dashes a lot because she sort of gave me permission to use dashes. And I love to use dashes and ampersands. And the ampersand is kind of my little mark on. But
That was in your
retain.
first poem, not black and white, but gray.
Mhm.
Got that right in the title.
Yep. And it's when she wrote as well. So she was writing in being published in the 1850s. No, she was writing in the 1850s. And at the same time, now think of her style, and then think of Walt Whitman, who was writing at the same time. Just a flow of words, almost subconscious, exposing the subconscious thinking. And I always wondered, did they know each other? Did they know each other's work? I don't think so, because I've never found any reference either way on either side of it. So, wow, what years they were.
And, the form that she developed, pretty much, I mean, she wasn't in contact with anybody. And it's so different than the poetry that came before her, or even that was contemporary to her.
Yes. Yeah.
Was this her stubborn streak, or was it a burst of illumination? What did it come from?
My guess would be that it's her solitary, the way she lived such a solitary life, that things were quiet and small. And of course, she wasn't sending it out. She was just, her sister actually sent all her poems to the publisher in Boston. And I just think it was partly the way she lived her life is reflected in her quiet, short, but very contemporary poems.
Very, very fresh.
Yeah.
Now, she wrote about 900, am I right?
Oh, yeah. So, I don't have her collected. Oh, it's like this thick.
Yeah.
Her collected poems. I think it's much more than 900, but.
And how long was she writing? I don't even know how long she lived. She
didn't live very long. She died, I believe, in her early 50s. Of course, maybe that was middle. Well, I don't know about then. She died as a younger person, I think. And just so contemporary is how they seem to me. I think that was part of it. If you think about all the language that was being produced by someone like Thoreau, he takes a 20-minute walk, and writes a 5-page essay.
No, thanks.
Okay, I have 2 more poems.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, this is from page 63. And this will tell you when this book was published in the last year. This is called Sheltered. And it's a form of a ghazal, which I'm not going to take time to explain, but a ghazal is a very old form, like think Persia.
7th century.
Yeah, in the 5th century. And it's a series of couplets, 6 couplets. They may not even be connected to themselves. And then in the last couplet, you are allowed to bring them together. You want to bring them together. How do these 6 other things relate to each other? So you find a theme or a thread. And you may mention yourself or God in the 7th couplet. So here I go. Sheltered, a ghazal. Although I don't want to miss you, I think of you daily, again and again. That former friend, I think of her daily, again and again. In the backyard, spring blooms abound, daffodils, hyacinth, tulips. I praise them again and again. My sweet elderly tuxedo cat is slowly dying of cancer. I love him, call him by his name again and again. The 50-year-old pear tree blossoms. Pink petals fall with the east wind again and again. The kitchen cupboards have been cleaned, decluttered. Every day, dishes must be washed again and again. Today, the ironing, a neat pile awaiting spray starch. You must complete this chore, Anne, again and again. And then I'm going to read the title poem, my last read here. 61, Fire in the Desert. And it's dedicated to Nick, Courtney's next youngest brother. Nick took the photograph of the fire in the desert that's on the cover. So this poem is for him. Getting away from city lights, the strip in the distance, they went out into the desert, built a fire for nighttime warmth, welcomed starlight, the waxing moon. Above them, the sky sparkled. Their words were quietly awestruck, astonished by the heavens. God made all this, he said. She wondered about that, hoping it might be true, but doubtful. In hindsight, the theory as possible is the exploding sun and black holes posited by the scientists. In silence, they considered their lifelong partners, children, friends, all those they loved as dearly as they loved each other. Thank you, Nick.
Beautiful.
And thank you all who are listening. I don't know if there are questions.
Yeah, there are a few questions
Okay.
from the audience. So one from Bar Scott. He says, tell us about the title, the Age of Bronze.
So Bar lives in Corvallis, and I know Bar. So Bar, the Age of Bronze was the title my mother gave to her poem, which is the title poem of the book. And she's talking about the years, her surprise at turning 70 and realizing it was wonderful. And she wondered what came after the Age of Gold. And she wondered if it was the Age of Bronze. So that's where that one came from. And I hope that explains what you wondered.
He says thank you in the comments. And then you have another question. And as you were working on the 5th book, what surprised you?
Well, when I feel this way often. So, but whenever I start, well, when I start putting a book together, I realize that I have enough poems. So I'm ready to do second drafts and have a couple of readers do back cover blurbs for me and so forth. But I guess the surprise is I'm still alive to write them. You know, lucky me.
Lucky
And
you.
as I said, I'll have 2 more books coming out this spring or early this summer. And I think when I wake up and start a poem, you know, thank goodness I'm still here. I don't think I'll be writing in heaven. You know, I'm kind of doubtful about heaven, but if I am in heaven, there will be a writing group. And Liz will be in it when she gets there.
So. Oh my goodness.
Drew Myron says, what came first, writing letter or writing poems?
Drew also is a friend and a wonderful writer herself. She lives up in Hood River. And could you say the question again? Which came first?
Yeah, which came first, writing letters or writing poems for you?
Letters first. Letters led to essays. And then, as I said earlier, I think most junior high school girls write poetry, keep journals. I did. You know, it's terrible stuff. I'm so glad I didn't keep any of it. I might never have written anything further.
Embarrassing.
Thanks for your question, Drew.
Another question is from Darcy Kirk.
Oh, yeah.
And asked, what were a few things from your teaching years that surprised you or caught you off guard about teaching about writing?
Oh, well, Darcy's a former student of mine. And we met when she was my student. I just, well, what I feel, I don't only feel this, I know this. Everyone has stories to tell. And if you're given time and quiet and support, they will come out of you. And if you're not afraid to write. And I always said to my students, you're not writing for me. You're not writing for each other. You're writing for yourself. So tell the truth. Write all of it down. Don't erase anything. Just write and then see what you have. And of course, first they wouldn't share. They didn't want to share. So then I would have them pair up. You just share with one person. They'd share their poem with you. And no criticisms, just what you notice. Just what you notice in the poem. And then I made groups of 4. And now it was getting, quite noisy in the classroom when they were talking with each other. And then pretty soon everyone wanted to share all their poems. So that was a surprise, a teaching surprise for me. But I just thought I'll try this because these adolescents are not gonna, they're just not gonna do it. But I would say share as little as the title or a line that you like, or don't share anything. It's all right. So, yes, thanks. Thanks, Darcy.
All right, well, that about wraps up our time. I just wanted to thank you again on behalf of Grassroots, Jack and Sandy. Thank you so much for doing this reading, Anne. We really appreciate it. It was a pleasure. And thank you, Liz, for co-hosting. You guys did so great. It was such a great conversation. This video will be available on our YouTube page if you ever want to go back and watch it again. And again, we encourage you to buy Anne's books, her different collections from Grassroots from our website. And you can also stop by the store if you're in Corvallis. We do have Fire in the Desert right now in store, and we'd be happy to see you come in. But with that, I will close it out and thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, Liz.
And
Yeah.
thank you, Courtney.
Good night.
Good night.